3 lies before goodbye. She loved him while hiding the gun. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and it truly helps us bring you more dramatic stories like this one. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. A single candle flickered on a small dinner table, its wax pooling slowly beside untouched plates. Across from that candle sat a man named Yen, his eyes fixed on the clock above the kitchen counter. 9:47 p.m. The food had gone cold hours ago. He lifted his phone. One message glowed on the screen: "I will be home soon." He smiled faintly, unaware that somewhere across the city, that promise was already breaking. Rain hammered the glass walls of a high-rise rooftop. Lynn ran through the empty corridor, her heels echoing against the concrete floor. A laptop pressed tightly against her chest, its faint blue light flashing the words, "Mission complete." A helicopter beam swept across the building, painting streaks of white through the storm. She ducked behind a steel column, breathing hard, then glanced at her phone, the same message still unsent, blinking like a lie waiting to be born. She hit send. Somewhere, a notification chimed in Yen's quiet apartment. 3 lies, her voice whispered in her mind. That is all I asked for, just 3 lies before goodbye. The city roared below, alive and distant. Neon signs bled through the rain, casting pink and violet on her soaked jacket. Lynn closed her eyes for a moment. She could still see Yen's smile from that morning, how he had leaned against the doorway, teasing her about her constant late nights. "You work too much," he said, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "One day, you will forget what resting feels like." She had laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when a person is too tired to explain their truth. If only he knew that her nights were not spent debugging code, but erasing lives. Lynn took a slow breath, opening her eyes. The rooftop wind cut through her coat. She tapped her earpiece. "Sue, extraction point secured. I am done." "Come?" Her younger sister's voice crackled through static. "You said this would be the last one." "It is," Lynn said softly, though her chest ached with doubt. "After tonight, we stop." Down below, the police sirens began to wail, closer, louder. A drone scanned the building perimeter, red sensors blinking. Lynn slid her weapon into the holster beneath her coat, her reflection catching in the rain-slicked window. The face that stared back looked nothing like the woman Yen loved. This version of her was colder, sharper, and far more afraid. She whispered to the glass, as if to him, "I wish you could meet both of me just once." A door slammed open behind her. Heavy boots. Shouts. Lynn turned, her movements precise, controlled muscle memory born from years of surviving what she could never confess. But even then, her heart was somewhere else, in a tiny apartment where a man waited beside cooling plates and a dying candle. Yen glanced once more at his phone, sighed, and whispered to the empty room, "Come home soon." The wind outside carried that wish across the city. Up on the rooftop, Lynn stepped into the storm, swallowed by the roar of rain and rotor blades. This is how their story begins, with one promise, one lie, and the quiet sound of a heart choosing love over truth. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving the city wrapped in mist. Lynn stood at the edge of her apartment balcony, the first sunlight cutting through the haze, brushing against her tired face. From this high up, everything looked calm: streets waking, vendors opening shutters, a child chasing a paper plane down the alley. It could have been a normal morning, but normal was something Lynn had not known for years. Inside the apartment, computers hummed quietly. Monitors filled the walls: maps, encrypted feeds, financial trails. Sue, her younger sister, sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by cables and half-eaten cereal. She looked up when Lynn came in, still wearing the same dark coat from last night. "You did not sleep," Sue said, typing fast without looking away from her screen. "I could say the same," Lynn replied, pulling off her gloves and tossing them onto the table. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she poured coffee into a chipped mug. "It is done. The data is in our drive." "Tumzip." Sue turned her chair around, eyes sharp. "You mean his data, the man behind Father's death?" Lynn nodded slowly. "Yes, Chow Louis Corporation. He used Father's software, twisted it for government contracts, then killed him to bury the evidence." She took a sip of coffee, eyes distant. "Now that proof is ours." Sue crossed her arms, worry cutting through her usual confidence. And what now? You said this was the last job. Do you mean it this time? Lynn smiled faintly, her gaze softening. I do. I am tired of running, of pretending to be someone else. Once we sell this data, we can disappear live like normal people. Normal people? Sue repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her. We are ghosts, Lynn. You think changing our names will erase what we have done? Lynn looked down at her cup. Steam drifted upward, dissolving like her thoughts. Maybe not, but I can try to stop adding new names to the list. Silence filled the room for a long moment. Only the soft clicking of Sue's keyboard broke it. Then Sue said quietly, He does not know, does he? The man you are seeing. Lynn froze, fingers tightening around the mug. Yen? Sue shrugged. You talk about him like he is some kind of light. Does he know who you really are? Lynn turned toward the window, her reflection fractured by the sunlight. He knows enough, she said after a pause. He thinks I fix systems. In a way I do. I just never told him what kind of systems. Sue sighed. You cannot build a future on a lie, Lynn. I am not trying to build a future, Lynn said softly. I just want to remember what it feels like to have one. Down below, a car horn echoed through the morning traffic. Lynn's phone buzzed. A message from Yen. Coffee at our spot? 10 a.m. She stared at the screen for a while before replying, yes. Sue watched her, eyes softer now. You really like him, huh? Lynn gave a small laugh. He makes the world quiet, just for a moment. That is enough. Doshu. As she prepared to leave, she paused by the door, pulling her hair into a loose bun and slipping on a simple white blouse, the kind Yen liked because it made her look like sunlight. She hesitated, glancing back at the computers still running. On the central monitor, the encrypted file blinked. Chow Louis evidence. Final. Turn it off if anyone traces it, she said. Sue nodded. Be careful, Lynn. People like us do not get to fall in love. Lynn smiled sadly. Maybe that is why I want to try. Outside, the city was waking for real now, taxis honking, vendors shouting prices, the smell of fried buns mixing with damp concrete. As she stepped into the crowd, Lynn felt the weight of two worlds pressing on her shoulders, one where she hunted in shadows, and another where she could finally breathe beside someone who did not know her sins. And somewhere deep down, she feared that sooner or later, those two worlds would collide and destroy everything she was trying to save. The coffee shop was tucked away on a quiet corner of the city, its windows fogged by the morning chill. Lynn arrived a few minutes early, her heart beating faster than usual. She had traded her dark coat for a light beige trench, hoping to look like someone ordinary, someone who belonged to this world. The smell of roasted beans and soft jazz music wrapped around her as she took a seat near the window. A few moments later, Yen walked in. He carried that easy confidence she loved, pressed shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes warm even after long nights of coding. He spotted her instantly and smiled, the kind of smile that made the noise in her head fade away. You are early, he said, setting down 2 cups of coffee. That is new. Lynn returned the smile, pretending to be relaxed. You caught me. I was trying to beat your record for once. He laughed softly and leaned back in his chair. So, Miss Engineer, what secret projects are you hiding these days? Lynn stirred her coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream disappear. Just the usual fixing what is broken. Always fixing, he said, studying her. You know, I sometimes wonder if you ever get tired of holding everything together. She looked up, their eyes meeting through the morning light. Maybe, she admitted. But if I stop, it all falls apart. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the street reflected in the window, a woman crossing with a red umbrella, a man calling for a taxi, the ordinary rhythm of life that Lynn had always watched from afar. She wanted to tell him everything right then, to confess that her hands had touched more blood than keyboards, that her code could crash governments. But the words stayed locked behind her smile. Yen broke the silence. You know, my company got invited to a private cybersecurity conference next week. You should come with me. Meet some of the partners, show them what you do. Lynn froze, the spoon stilling in her cup. A conference meant background checks, photographs, questions she could not afford to answer. She masked her panic with a small laugh. Me? I am just a freelancer. They would not even let me pass the front door. Yen leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You underestimate yourself. You have the mind of someone who could run her own firm one day. Maybe, she said softly. But I am not ready for that spotlight. He studied her for a beat longer, then nodded. Fair enough. Just promise me you will let me in someday show me what you are really working on. The words struck deeper than he could have known. Lynn smiled, but her voice trembled. I promise, one day. Later that afternoon, she returned to her apartment. Sue was still at her desk, analyzing the stolen data. Screens glowed with lines of code and financial records, proof that the corporation had funneled millions into illegal arms technology. Sue did not even look up when Lynn entered. Did you tell him? Lynn slipped off her trench coat and hung it by the door. No, he would never understand. Sue sighed, rubbing her temples. You are playing a dangerous game, Lynn. The more time you spend with him, the harder it will be to walk away. I know, Lynn said quietly, but he makes me feel human. When I am with him, I can almost forget what I am. Sue turned in her chair, her expression softening despite herself. Then make sure he never finds out. Not until we are done. Lynn crossed the room and picked up a small silver flash drive lying beside the keyboard. This is the backup? Encrypted and mirrored, Sue confirmed. We leak this, and Chow Louis' empire burns. Lynn closed her fist around it, feeling its cold weight. Then this is the last one, she whispered. That night, she lay awake beside her phone, staring at the blinking cursor on a text message she would never send. There are things I want to tell you, Yen, but I do not know how. Outside, thunder rolled far off across the sea. In the faint light of her screen, the silver flash drive gleamed like a secret too heavy to hold and too dangerous to let go. 2 days later, the rain returned. It drummed softly on the glass of Yen's office as he worked through lines of code, his focus broken only when Lynn appeared at the door. She stood there for a moment, hesitant, her hair damp from the storm and her white blouse clinging to her shoulders. You should not come out in this weather, he said, setting down his laptop. You will catch a cold. She smiled faintly. I wanted to see you. You always say coffee tastes better when it is raining. Lin Quan. He laughed and shook his head, reaching for an extra mug from the shelf. You remember everything I say. That is dangerous. Maybe I like dangerous, she said, half teasing, half true. As he poured the coffee, she walked to the window. The city below shimmered in silver light, skyscrapers veiled by fog. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace. Yen joined her, handing her the mug. His sleeve brushed against hers, and she felt the quiet warmth of his presence. Tell me something, he said suddenly. If you could stop time just for a minute, where would you be? Lynn thought about that, about all the places she had been where time had blurred into fear and adrenaline. Then she looked at him. Right here, she said simply. He smiled. Then I hope this minute lasts forever. For a heartbeat, she believed it could. They spent the afternoon talking about everything ordinary childhood memories, favorite foods, the kind of small details that make life feel real. Lynn told him she once dreamed of traveling to the Pacific Northwest, where the forests stretch forever and the air smells like pine and rain. Yen promised that one day he would take her there. She nodded, pretending she believed in one day. When evening fell, they walked together through the narrow streets behind the office. The neon lights reflected off wet pavement, coloring their faces in shades of pink and blue. Yen stopped by a small flower stand and bought a single white tulip. He handed it to her. For luck, he said. Lynn stared at the flower, remembering how her mother once told her that tulips symbolized forgiveness. She accepted it with a quiet smile. I will keep it safe. They reached the bus stop, where the city buzzed with night traffic. Yen looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face. You know, he said softly, sometimes it feels like I am falling in love with a mystery. There is always something behind your eyes, something I cannot quite see. Lynn's breath caught, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. Maybe I am just afraid that if you see too much, you will run. He shook his head. Not me. I do not run. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe in a world where she could tell him the truth and still be held the same way. But she knew how fragile her disguise was. One wrong word, one slip of data, and everything would unravel. Later that night, back at the apartment, the tulip lay on her desk beside the silver flash drive. Sue was asleep on the couch, the monitors dimmed to standby. Lynn traced the edge of the flower's white petals with her finger, then opened her laptop. On the screen, a new message flashed from their anonymous contractor. Next mission. Priority level, red. Her heart sank. She had promised herself this would be the last, yet the network never released its own. She read the target's name and froze. It was Yen's company. The cursor blinked in silence. She closed the laptop slowly, staring at the tulip glowing faintly in the moonlight. The meaning shifted in her mind from forgiveness to warning. For the first time since she met him, Lynn did not know whether to protect the man she loved or the secret that defined her life. And as the rain outside began again, she whispered to herself, maybe this is where love stops pretending. The next morning came too soon. A thin line of sunlight crept through the blinds, cutting across the apartment's dim room. Lynn sat at her desk, the laptop open in front of her, her face pale and sleepless. The target file still glowed on the screen. Objective, Yen Systems Security Division. Every word felt like a blade. Sue stirred on the couch, yawning as she rubbed her eyes. You are still up? She asked. Lynn did not look away from the screen. They sent a new contract. Sue frowned, stretching. Already? Who is it this time? Lynn hesitated before answering. Yen's company. The sound of that name changed the air between them. Sue sat upright, fully awake. No, you are not serious. Lamal? I wish I were not, Lynn said quietly. They want full data infiltration, remote access to the firm's network, and if exposure risk is high, total shutdown. Sue's voice hardened. They are using you. You know what this means, Lynn. They are testing your loyalty. I know, Lynn whispered, pressing her palms against her face. They must have traced my location. They know about him. Sue stood, crossing the room to her. Then you have to end it. Cut him off before it gets worse. Do not let your heart get you killed. But Lynn only shook her head. I cannot just disappear. He deserves to know something, maybe not the truth, but something. Do not, Sue warned. You cannot save both of your worlds. Lynn closed the laptop with trembling hands. Maybe not, but I have to try. Later that day, she met Yen at their favorite cafe. The same place where they first shared coffee under the soft hum of morning jazz. Now, everything felt heavier. Yen noticed it instantly. You look tired, he said, touching her wrist gently. Is something wrong? She forced a smile. Just work. It has been complicated. He studied her face for a moment, the concern in his eyes too real, too kind. You can talk to me, you know that, right? Whatever it is, I am here. Lynn wanted to believe him. She wanted to let everything spill out, the truth about her father's death, the crimes she had committed, the shadow that followed her every step. But the words refused to leave her mouth. Instead, she said softly, Do you trust me? Yen blinked, surprised. Of course I do. Why would you even ask? She smiled weakly. Because sometimes people are not who they seem. Sometimes they hide because it is the only way to protect what matters. Yen tilted his head, confused. You are talking like someone saying goodbye. I am talking like someone trying not to lose everything, she said, barely above a whisper. He reached across the table and held her hand. Then do not lose it. Stay. Whatever this is, we can face it together. Lynn stared at his hand, covering hers, the warmth of it, the simplicity. No encryption, no lies, just human truth. And that was exactly what made it so dangerous. That night, back home, she sat beside Sue again. The younger woman was pacing, angry and afraid. You cannot protect him and survive. Choose, Lynn. Either you follow the mission, or we run before they come for both of us. Lynn opened the encrypted drive and began typing, her fingers steady now. I am not doing either. I am changing the mission. Sue froze. What are you doing? Redirecting the breach, Lynn said, her eyes on the code streaming down the screen. If I make it look like we already completed the task, they will not come after him. They will come after me instead. Lynn, stop. It is already done, she said quietly. You have to disappear, Sue. I will finish this. The rain started again outside, tapping the window like a clock ticking down. Lynn opened a small drawer and took out the white tulip Yen had given her. Its petals had begun to fade, but she pressed it carefully between the pages of a notebook labeled World Pan. One lie to keep him safe, she murmured. The second, to keep you alive. She looked up at Sue, her eyes steady. And the third will be the one that ends this. Shum. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, a sound like fate closing in. That night, the city was quiet, the kind of silence that hums before a storm. Lynn sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by open files, wires, and the dim glow of her monitors. The red indicator on her main console blinked steadily, proof that her fake data breach was holding, for now. Sue was gone, just as Lynn had told her to be. The younger sister had left before sunrise, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter. If you are not here when I come back, I will find you. Lynn smiled faintly when she read it, then folded it and tucked it into her pocket. Now, alone, she watched the lines of code running across the screen. Each command she typed erased another trace of Yen's company from the dark network. She was rewriting the system that had once served her, turning the weapon back on itself. But no amount of code could erase what she had done, or what she still had to do. Her phone buzzed beside her. Yen's name lit up the screen. She hesitated before answering. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, unaware of the chaos spinning around her. "I have been thinking about what you said earlier, about people not being who they seem. If that is your way of telling me something, you can. You do not have to protect me from whatever it is." Lynn closed her eyes. His kindness made it harder. "It is not that simple, Yen." "It never is," he said. "But I want you to know something. I do not care what your past is. I care about who you are when you are with me." She wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You have no idea what that means." "Then tell me," he said, hopeful. "Let me in." Lynn looked at the blinking cursor on her console, at the countdown timer marking the final phase of her redirection program. "One day," she whispered, "I will." When she ended the call, she sat in the dark for a long time, her hand resting on the keyboard, her mind racing through every possibility. If her cover broke, Yen would be targeted next. If she vanished, he would go looking for her, and that would be his end. The rain started again, tapping against the glass like quiet footsteps. Lynn got up, pulled on her coat, and slipped the flash drive into her pocket. She needed to destroy the physical evidence before the network traced it. By the time she reached the parking garage, the wind had picked up. Neon signs flickered above her, their reflections bending across puddles of rainwater. She climbed into her car, started the engine, and drove toward the old warehouse district, the same place where she had once carried out her first mission. The past felt close here. The smell of rust, the hum of power lines, the echo of her own footsteps on wet concrete. She approached an abandoned storage room, its walls covered with graffiti and dust. She placed the flash drive in the steel incinerator she had used years ago and watched as it began to melt, the metal glowing faintly red before dissolving into ash. For a moment, she let herself breathe. The secret was gone. Yen was safe. Sue was free. Then her earpiece crackled. A cold, unfamiliar voice filled the silence. "You really thought you could trick us, Lynn?" Her blood ran cold. She turned toward the doorway. Shadows moved at the edge of the light, three figures, all armed, all wearing the same insignia she had once worn herself. "You have been compromised for months," the voice continued. "And now you will finish what you started, or we will finish him." Lynn's breath caught. "Do not touch him," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "You know the rules," the voice said. "No one walks away." The transmission cut out, leaving only static. Lynn stood there, staring at the dying embers in the incinerator, her reflection trembling in the metal. She realized then that love had not set her free. It had only drawn her back into the fire. She pulled out her phone, opened a blank message, and typed, "Yen, if I do not come home tonight, remember the tulip." She never pressed send. The warehouse lights flickered as Lynn backed away from the shadows. The air smelled of rain and iron. Three men stepped forward, faces hidden, weapons raised. She could feel the pulse of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. "You trained me better than this," she said quietly. "You know I do not miss." The tallest man chuckled. "You used to be one of us, Lynn. That is why you know how this ends." She took a slow breath, her mind racing. The gun at her hip felt heavier than ever, but she did not reach for it. Instead, she spoke with the same calm she used to use in negotiations. "I erased everything. The files, the backups. The drive is gone. There is nothing left to sell." "Except you," the man said, stepping closer. "You still know the codes. That is all we need." Behind him, thunder cracked. Lynn's eyes darted toward the far door, her old escape route, 20 feet away. She could make it, maybe, but running would only delay the inevitable. "You should have disappeared when you had the chance," the man said. "Now we have to clean up." He raised his gun. The shot never came. A blinding flash burst from the incinerator as the remaining chemical ignited. Smoke exploded through the room, thick and acrid. Lynn lunged, knocking the nearest man off balance. The second one fired wildly into the haze. Sparks flew from the walls. She pushed through the cloud, coughing, disoriented but alive. When the smoke cleared, she was outside, the rain washing soot from her hair. Her car was still parked across the alley. She sprinted toward it, every step echoing in her chest like a countdown. Her phone rang Yen's number. She stopped, breath ragged, staring at the screen. For a heartbeat, she considered answering. But if she did, the network could trace the signal. She let it ring out. She climbed into the car, hands trembling as she turned the key. Headlights cut through the downpour, painting streaks across the cracked windshield. Then she saw a dark sedan in the rearview mirror, following at a steady distance. They had found her again. Lynn pressed the accelerator. The tires screeched against the wet asphalt. The streets blurred past, empty and glistening. She turned sharply onto the coastal road, waves crashing against the barrier below. Wind roared through the half-open window, cold and relentless. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text appeared. "We have him. Stop running." Her hands froze on the wheel. For a moment she could not breathe. The road curved ahead, narrow and slick, headlights reflecting off the sea spray. "Please, not him," she whispered. She grabbed the earpiece from her pocket and spoke into it. "I will do whatever you want. Just do not hurt him." The reply came at once, a single command that shattered the night. "Come home, Lynn. Finish the job. Come ball." She slowed the car, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. The city lights glittered in the distance, cold and unreachable. For the first time, she understood what it meant to lose even before the fight had begun. The highway lights faded behind her as Lynn drove toward the old headquarters, the same place where she had once been trained to kill without hesitation. The building stood silent against the storm, its metal gates half open as if it had been waiting for her. She stopped the car, turned off the engine, and listened to the sound of the rain pounding the roof. Every drop sounded like a second ticking away. Inside the building, everything was exactly as she remembered: the cold hallways, the hum of servers, the faint smell of oil and dust. She walked slowly, her footsteps echoing. On the far side of the main room, a large monitor flickered to life. The same voice from before came through the speaker. "You made the right choice," it said. "He is safe for now." Lynn clenched her fists. "Where is he?" "Somewhere quiet," the voice replied. "Finish the infiltration, and you will see him again." "You already have the data," she said, her voice trembling but sharp. "What more do you want?" "We want you, Lynn. You are the access key. You are the final piece that unlocks the next phase." Her heart sank. They never intended to let her go. She knew it now. They would use her one last time and then erase her completely. She walked to the central terminal, the familiar keyboard under her fingertips. Her reflection stared back at her from the screen, dark circles beneath her eyes, a face caught between love and guilt. She started typing, her movements calm, deliberate. Line after line of code appeared, the system recognizing her credentials. While the program loaded, she spoke into the open channel. "If I do this, you release him. No harm." "Agreed," the voice said. She almost laughed. "You never were good at keeping promises." A new file opened, one that gave her direct control of the network's global hub. With a few more commands, she could transfer their assets, erase identities, burn their empire from the inside out. But doing that meant she would never escape alive. Her phone vibrated on the desk. A video message from Yen appeared. He was sitting in a dark room, a bruise on his temple, his eyes searching the lens. "Lynn," he said, voice unsteady, "I do not know what is happening, but please stop. Whatever they want, it is not worth your life." Tears blurred her vision. She touched the screen gently, her voice barely a whisper. "You are the only thing that ever was." The main terminal beeped, waiting for her final input. She entered one last string of code, the same encryption her father had built years ago. It was a self-destruct program, the last safeguard of his system. The voice shouted through the speaker, "What are you doing? Stop it now!" Lynn's lips curved into a faint smile. "I am finishing what he started." She hit enter. The servers roared to life, lights flashing red. Fire alarms blared as power surged through the building. She grabbed her phone, sending one final message to Sue. "It is over. Protect him." As flames spread across the control room, Lynn turned toward the exit. The world behind her burned brighter than the storm outside. And somewhere within that fire, the network that once controlled her was collapsing line by line, secret by secret, until nothing remained but truth. Smoke drifted through the dawn light as fire trucks surrounded the ruins of the old headquarters. The storm had passed, leaving behind only the faint hiss of water against burned steel. Reporters spoke into their microphones. Police officers moved through the debris, and the city began to wake to a story it did not yet understand. Across town, in a small hospital room by the harbor, Yen opened his eyes. The last thing he remembered was a blinding flash, the sound of sirens, and then darkness. Now, everything smelled of antiseptic and salt. His head throbbed, but he was alive. On the nightstand beside him lay a folded note and a small object sealed in a glass case. The note was written in Lynn's handwriting, precise, calm, and heartbreakingly familiar. If you are reading this, it means you are safe. I wanted to tell you everything, but I ran out of time. My father built something powerful, and I used it the wrong way. Loving you was the only thing that made me remember who I used to be. Do not grieve for me. Take what is left and turn it into something good. Beneath the letter sat a single white tulip. Yen stared at it for a long time, the petals trembling slightly from the draft of the open window. He reached out and touched the glass, whispering, "You kept your promise. Chew." Weeks later, the world knew her name. Lynn's final program had exposed the entire network offshore accounts, government deals, every dark transaction hidden in digital shadows. The story spread across every news outlet. She was no longer a ghost. She was a whistleblower, a vigilante, and for some, a savior. Sue returned quietly from hiding. Together, she and Yen founded the Lynn Foundation for Truth and Light. Their first project funded cybersecurity programs for underprivileged students' children who, like Lynn once was, needed a reason to believe in second chances. Every year, on the same day, Yen would visit the garden behind the foundation's building. He always brought one white tulip and placed it by the bronze plaque that bore her words, "A lie can hide the truth but never love." He would stand there in silence, watching the morning sun reflect off the nearby harbor. Sometimes he thought he could hear her voice in the wind, soft and distant, saying his name the way she used to, half a whisper, half a promise. One morning, a young girl from the foundation approached him and asked, "Mr. Yen, is she the reason you started this place?" He smiled gently, nodding. Yes. She believed that even the darkest code can be rewritten. The girl grinned, not fully understanding, and ran off to class. Yen looked back at the tulip, its petals open toward the Sunday. For a long moment, he simply stood there, breathing in the quiet air, grateful that love, real love, had managed to outlast the lies that once surrounded it. And as he turned to leave, the light caught the engraved letters one last time, glowing softly in the morning gold. 3 lies before goodbye,